Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Who Said What. I'm your host Krishna. Thank you to everyone who shared feedback on the last video. For those of you who are new here, let me quickly set some context for what this show is about. See, the idea is that we'll pick the most interesting and juiciest comments from business leaders, fund managers, and the likes and contextualize things around it. Now, some of these names might not be familiar, but trust me, they are influential people and what they say matters a lot because of their experience and background. So, I'll make sure to bring a mix. Some names you'll know, some you'll discover, and hopefully, all of this together will give you a wide and useful perspective. With that out of the way, let me get started. This week, a short seller named Viceroy Research called Vedanta Resources, which is the parent company of Vedanta Limited, a Ponzi scheme. See, short sellers are investors who make money by betting on a company's stock price going down. They sell a stock for high price and if they get their bets right, they buy it back later at a lower price, pocketing the difference. They're kind of like the janitors of the stock market. They sweep up the mess in the market by identifying fraud and bringing some order to the chaos. But let's be clear. Since they are a short seller, they make money if Vedanta's stock price falls. Just because they've published a research report doesn't mean they're right. They want people to believe Vedanta is in trouble because that's how their trade pays off. So take their claims with 2 buckets of salt. That said, sometimes short sellers shine a light where others aren't looking. Anyhow, what they're saying about Vedanta, which is such a large company, is wild and a very interesting saga. So I thought, why not go through their claims? Now, before I get into all of this, remember this that Vedanta Resource Limited, that is VRL, is the parent company of the listed company Vedanta Limited. So here's what Viceroy calls a Ponzi scheme. They say that Vedanta Resources, the parent entity, is feeding on its listed subsidiary just to stay alive. The key claim is this, that Vedanta Resources forces its subsidiary to borrow money in order to pay its dividends. It uses those to pay off the interest on its massive debt that came from years of borrowing to fund acquisitions, projects and whatnot. But this, Viceroy claims, is self-destructive. The only valuable thing that Vedanta Resources owns is its shareholding in Vedanta Limited. But by feeding on it, it's eating away at that very value. Now, how bad is it? Viceroy says that over the last 3 years, Vedanta Limited generated around 46,000 crore rupees less in cash than it paid out in dividends. It paid roughly 66,000 crore in dividends during that time, money that it didn't earn. This is Viceroy's main claim and the biggest reason it suspects the company's long-term health is in jeopardy. But there are other claims that Viceroy makes. The other thing that the parent company, which is Vedanta Resources, owns is the Vedanta brand. Now Vedanta Limited and its group companies have paid 8,000 crores over 3 years in so-called brand fees to the parent company for using the Vedanta brand. But their research asks this. Is this a genuine service that the company offers, or is it just an arrangement to funnel money up the chain? To be fair though, this isn't exactly unique. Many other conglomerates have similar arrangements, where a parent company earns by leasing its brand to many revenue-creating group companies. Viceroy says the interest expenses of Vedanta Resources don't add up. See, when you look at the books, it seems like Vedanta Resources is effectively paying interest of 15.8%. But the bonds it has issued and the term loans it discloses have an interest rate of around 9 to 11%. So, what's going on? Viceroy claims there's some financial jugaad behind the scenes. Maybe there's hidden debt we don't know about. Or it's using super short-term loans with sky-high interest, or maybe it's just straight up misreporting the numbers. They also make serious allegations against almost all of Vedanta's subsidiaries, from a gold refinery in Dubai accused of laundering to mines that are shut but still shown as active to inflated asset values and unpaid revenues being booked. Viceroy makes a string of allegations against a variety of Vedanta operations. The only one it spares is Balco, which it calls a rare example of disciplined capital management and considers the exception that proves the rule. Finally, Viceroy claims that Vedanta Resources has been pulling in money from the entire group and using it to quietly tighten their grip over the money-making Indian subsidiary. In some cases, in fact, they claim that the money comes from Vedanta Limited itself. At one point, they claim Vedanta Resources took a 7,900 crore loan from Vedanta Limited in order to delist the company and take complete control of it. In essence, Vedanta Limited's own money was being used to buy out its own shareholders. It claims that half of that loan is still unpaid. Now, Viceroy claims this was part of a larger playbook, which is repeatedly borrowing from group companies, using that money to increase control, then quietly writing off the loans. Now, as I said earlier, short sellers aren't always the knights in the shining armor they might seem to be, but they do perform an important role of shining a light in places where most people don't usually look. It's for investors to then decide if that light actually reveals anything. If you're interested, we recommend that you read through the report, look through Vedanta's own filings, and then see if the picture adds up to you. Or you can just sit back with a bag of popcorn and enjoy this one hell of a corporate drama. Much like everyone else, we have found it impossible to ignore the developments in the Chinese economy. It's pretty evident if you follow our daily show, The Daily Brief. So we listened to Lu Feng, who served in the Chinese State Planning Commission that formulated national economic plans and policies, and he was also a director at Tsinghua University. In a recent interview, he made one bold statement after another. Here's one. In the face of US preparing for a full-on confrontation with China, China must not surrender. It must meet the challenge head-on. How must it do that? By tapping into its ability to make things even further and never giving up on it. He rejects this accusation that China is flooding the world with its goods. China's industrial prowess is as strategic to them as a dollar is to America. Feng points to basic industry as what continues to power China's growth. Stuff like steel, chemicals, and even simple finished goods. These must not be shut down, especially in the favor of high-tech industries, as the latter can only be built with the former. China still has to convert 200 million rural residents into urban ones, and he says that the basic industry is the pathway for that. And it seems to be what China is doing. Despite some decline over time, labor-intensive manufacturing still constitutes 32% of China's output. It is still the factory of the entire world, and no other country has been able to take over its role. All the while, it's making advancements in making semiconductors and AI. Ironically, he draws lessons from the US's mistake. China's early growth period resembles that of America. However, to stimulate growth again, America replaced its industry in favor of a financial base, like prioritizing Wall Street. It lost the ability to make things while incurring high labor costs. He concludes that the historical truth is that America's industrial decline was self-inflicted. A researcher from Princeton, Kyle Chan, whose newsletter we highly recommend, calls this philosophy Chinese industrial maximalism. It basically refers to China's strategy of pursuing large-scale trade-driven industrial development across many sectors simultaneously, aiming for dominance through sheer scale, speed, and coordination. Lu Feng sees this as possible only because of a strong Chinese state that always prioritizes industry. And this could make all the difference in the showdown between the superpowers. See, GST is one of those weird regimes that has many admirers as it has haters. On one hand, it stitched India's many states into a single market, making it much easier to run a pan-India business. On the other hand, it's hardly an elegant law, creating confusion and compliance issues of all kinds. See, the government itself is aware of these gaps. In fact, a few months ago, the Parliament's Public Accounts Committee called for an overhaul of the GST regime, asking for simple compliance and procedures that are easier to work with. Recently, the same call was echoed by Rajiv Memani, the president of the Confederation of Indian Industry. In a recent interview to Money Control, he said,
But I think it's time to do the 2.0 version of response. So more simplification, particularly more simplification in the course of audits, more simplification in compliance.
In essence, he thinks we are past the time where concerns of implementation and adoption ate up the mind space of policymakers. It's now time to shift to one's attention to making it easier for businesses to interact with this system. To this extent, he pointed to several specific issues with how the GST system currently works. To start with, he says,
the purpose for which GST was set up was really that there is uninterrupted credit transfer. So to the extent that those lines are getting broken, whether because of input tax credit, whether because some items not being subsumed in GST.
See, one of GST's core promises was a seamless input tax credit. If a business paid taxes on its inputs, it could claim credit for them while making a sale. In practice though, this has broken down. From frequent rule changes, mismatches in invoice to delays in vendor filings, claiming credits can be a nightmare. That's what Memani is pointing to. If the uninterrupted credit chain is interrupted, suddenly the GST becomes a lot less attractive as a tax regime. There's also a problem of rates. He says,
and also rationalization of rates. So uh, if we can, particularly those products which go into mass consumption, which benefit the 0 to 30%, bottom income of the 0 to 30%. If those products are that are going there, I think that is very, very important.
today we have a complex tax rate structure with 4 tiers: 5%, 12%, 18%, 28%, along with a range of exemptions and cesses. Not only is all of this difficult to keep track of, it has also turned regressive, with the poorest households paying the most tax. This is what Memani thinks we need to avoid. Finally, he talks about the weird audit structure under the GST that makes things extremely difficult.
If you're operating in 5 states, it doesn't mean you need to have 5 audits. You can have one audit, and all the states can rely on that audit. We can have an unbiased process of identifying who that lead state is, and then everyone can, then it applies uniformly to this. And then after that, if there is, investigations after that. So I think the entire GST audit process is become very, very cumbersome. And I think that's something that we have to find a way to make it more efficient.
Under GST, businesses are registered state-wise. Every registration is treated as a separate entity. So a company that works in many states could be subject to multiple audits by different state tax authorities. This wastes companies' time and effort. Memani argues for a single simplified process. Now this, of course, isn't a comprehensive position paper on the issues with GST, but it's a good sampler of the issues the regime has. Where the early years of GST regimes were spent in getting people to play along, Memani has a point. The coming years should be about taking their inputs to be better at it. That's it for this episode. If you have made it this far, please let me know if you have any feedback for me in the comments below. Hi, hi, hi. Hello. Hello. Hello, hello. Just to say alive. Stay alive. Staying alive. So we listened to Lu Feng, who served in the Chinese state.
So we listened to Lu Feng, who served. So we listened to Lu Feng. So we listened to Lu Feng, who served in the Chinese state. So we listened to Lu Feng.
All of this will give you a wide and useful perspective. Always prioritizes. म्हणजे सर डन हो गए क्या? नहीं सर